Hello everybody and welcome to the Quilters Apothecary. Today we are doing a flash toot on smelly quilts and not smelly quilts. So we're doing it on both. So the one thing I will say is this: once in a while I will get quilts that are either from a smoker's household, and I personally have no prejudice to that. I know how to handle it in my studio. The smell doesn't really bother me, and I know how to handle it ahead of time. Also, I do have an allergy to cats, and even though I do have an allergy to cats, I find that I can still take quilts in where the household is a cat household. With some people, you might be allergic to dogs, or some sort of heavy perfume if the person happens to have a perfumey type house where they use a lot of incense or that sort of stuff. So whatever the reason is, when I say smelly quilts, it's not always because they stink from garbage type smell. Sometimes it can be a smell that is just something you're very sensitive to. If you are somebody who happens to be very sensitive to something like that, you need to specify that upon your take-in form. So you need to be real specific if you have a website or if you have some sort of page like your YouTube. You may want to say, I do have an allergy to cats, so no cat quilts, please, or no quilts from smokers' households. There is not a problem with saying something like that if you want to specify that in your documentation or just in your sort of welcome page, your website sort of thing. Again, I don't worry about it a whole lot. I know how to take care of that and handle those sorts of things. And I'm not really sensitive to anything like that. And I run into them all the time because I have a lot of people that bring me quilts that smoke a lot. I have a lot of people that have cats. I have a lot of people that have dogs. I have a lot of people that have smelly houses, frankly, good and bad. But I deal with it. It's just not a big deal to me. So here are some of the ways that I deal with it. Now, if I get let's say I get a quilt that is a mess. Let's say it's one of the quilts you get, and again, I would never shame base anybody, but I would if I were you, and you can't handle something, say, you know what, I have an allergy to whatever it is that this is on this quilt. I can tell I'm real sensitive, so it's not, you're going to want to find another long arm quilter. I'm sorry about that. There's nothing bad with it. It's just obviously something here my body is not tolerating, and I do have some sensitivities. So you want to be real careful about offending somebody so they don't go to your local guild if you do take in client quilts and spread it all around that you're a mean, cranky person who trashes them and offends them and was rude to them. You don't want to do that. You just want to be very courteous about it. So when I get a cat quilt, and sometimes I get pretty heavy cat quilts. I have a few cat ladies that are clients of mine. When I say cat ladies, I mean the archetypal cat lady where the quilt comes in and it smells heavily of ammonia. And what I typically do is I use pant hangers, and I tend to spend a lot of time outside in the evenings. And if it's winter, I actually have a place outside that when I'm out there or near my back window where I have my drawing studio, I can watch the quilt. I never leave a quilt unsupervised outside, but I will hang it up like at least this time of year in the spring, summer, fall. And even late fall, and even winter, I will hang them outside while I am present. So when I'm outside, and you can see here in the picture, I actually have a quilt hanging. So this is how I would hang it up. So in the evening, I'm usually outside for 2 or 3 hours doing my watering my plants and that sort of thing. So I would hang it out there just to kind of get some air. And I might do that every night for a week just to kind of help disperse some of the odor from that particular quilt. And then in the evening when I go in, I actually have plastic bags like this. I would refold it, take it down from the hangers, refold it, put it in these bags, and what I would do is as I'm folding it up, I would use fabric sheets. So I get these. I like the Gain ones because they have a nice odor to them. And I would simply take some of these out, and as I'm folding the quilt up, I would shove in some of these dryer sheets in the midst of the quilt itself as I'm folding it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in the bag, and then I'm going to put it in a plastic bin and put it in the inside of my entryway, which is always locked. And then that way, the next night, if I need to put that back out and air it out a little bit more, I would go ahead and do that. And then after about a few nights, everything would be fine. The quilt would be manageable by me. And again, I haven't offended a client. The other thing is, which I'm going to hit next, is something a little less, such as taking a quilt in and how do I store it and where do I store it in my studio to keep it safe from potential hazards that could happen. Let's say smoke, let's say a fire, if there was, God forbid, a fire, which we did have once. So I'll go over that with you in just a minute. Okay, so in this particular case, I have two different size bins that I use for my wire racks from, I think we got them at Costco, that you would use in like an industrial kitchen. You can find them anywhere at any type of department store, but we use those to actually store the quilts on. In our old studio, we actually had a closet that we used with the wire racks in it to keep it kind of double safe. But now in our new studio, we actually have a back room that's a little more safe, and we store them there. But we use plastic bins in case of any type of smell, or let's say we're in an art space right now with multiple studios. If someone's working with some sort of chemical that smells strong, that is not going to go into the quilts the way that I store them. So how I store them is we have the regular size bins, and we also have the half size bins if they bring in singles. And so what I do is I use clear plastic bags. Never, ever, ever, God forbid, use black trash bags or even the white trash bags. Use clear. We don't want any quilts going home in black trash bags or white trash bags, set in the kitchen. Someone runs off to guild meeting and the husband hears the garbage truck out and they put the garbage bag in the trash. Yep, it's been multiple instances. It's almost like a urban legend. You hear a lot of people talking about that happening. So again, I use clear bags. So a customer will bring the quilt. We have our consult that we go through. And if you want to hear a little bit more about that, go ahead and go to our Coffee with Jamie. And we have the whole business episode on the Coffee with Jamie. And I go through how I take in quilts and deal with clients that way. Now, for this, what I use is the plastic bags, and each quilt gets a plastic bag. I have a lot of clients that bring in multiple quilts. In this particular case, this client brought 3 quilts, and every quilt gets a bag and a separate take-in form. So I'm going to find my end. There's my end. Open it up. Now, if this were a smoker's quilt, or a cat quilt like we had talked about before, I would take this home with me and do exactly what we talked about in the last part of this earlier. But right now, I have filled out my form, and what I like to do with my form is every form gets a page protector. I never take a form and put it directly on the quilt. If I've written in marker or written in some sort of pen and I put this in on the quilt, the ink could transfer right to a part of the fabric, and that is not something you want to try to explain to your client. So I use a plastic page protector. The invoice goes right in there, and actually I have 2 invoices. I grab the second quilt. I have my page protector order form. That's going to go right in the bag, and I don't just leave it in there. I actually close this bag. Now, before I do, what I like to do, I have, of course, I told you I have the dryer sheets. I have the scented and unscented. This is a clean quilt. This is not anything I have to worry about. I like to use one of the unscented clear. So there's no, even if they have an allergy to something, this does not smell. But I do like to have this in with the quilt just in case environmentally there's some sort of chemical or something here. And that will soak up some of that odor. And I always work the air out and I seal that plastic bag. I want a double protection. I want the bin and the bag. I know some of you hang them up in a wardrobe or something like that. That's great as well. If that works for you, this is simply how I do it. Same thing with the next one. I would use this. I would use my order form. I'm going to put that in a page protector. That's going to go in with the quilt. It's going to go in with a dryer sheet, unscented in this case. Again, if it were a smoke household, then I would be using the scented. Again, I like these. I like the Gain ones. They smell good. And there we go. And that is exactly how I take in the quilts. And once these are all in the bin, I go ahead and, so I don't eat up any more time, let's pretend all 3 quilts are in there. I cover it, I seal it, and then what I do is I have blue painter's tape that I keep and my Sharpie marker, and right on the end of the bin, I write the client's name, and I always write right on the tape, client's name, put that up here. Next thing down is the date of drop-off. I put that right here. And then if there is a deadline for that particular quilt, and that's pretty rare in my world, our edge to edges get out about 2 to 3 weeks, and any of our custom is anywhere from 3 months to 8 months, depending on how many customs we have and how many I'm willing to take in. And so if there is a deadline date, that would go on here as well. And then they go in order right up on my shelf. I have a section for my edge to edge because those always, I'm rotating through fairly quickly. And then I have another section on that wire rack for custom quilts. Okay, so that is how we do that. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that flash toot, and I hope that helps in case you get the dreaded smelly quilt of any sort. Remember, again, we don't ever want to offend or be abusive verbally to somebody about the smell of their quilt. And sometimes I go on Facebook and I see things said that I just can't imagine that people are going to be saying to a client, and it's very hurtful to someone to hear that about their household. There's always a nice way to say this isn't a good match for me. Okay, so as always, we shall see you all down the road. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.